So before we get started, I don't want you just to think Jim's an expert because I said so. I want to give you his background. It's a very interesting background, and if you think you may have seen him on TV, you probably did. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about him. First of all, he's stolen credit cards, he's hacked social security numbers, robbed banks, and created fake ATMs. So he's a good guy, right? He's broken into armed government facilities and he's stolen from teenagers. And he's an identity theft, but he is not a criminal. Fortunately for all victims involved, Jim is a cybersecurity expert with over 25 years in the industry who was hired to perform these attacks by corporations testing their security, news agencies investigating security concerns, and other media outlets interested in knowing just how easy it is to commit identity theft. His job is to find security flaws before the real criminals find them and warn people, which is what we're doing today, just so we can help you protect yourself. So he's been a consultant for a lot of network stations, Fox News, CBS, NBC, and he's been featured on a lot of shows. So you have seen him before, and I guarantee you will see him again. His expertise is very valued, and we are very privileged to have him here today, sharing information with each of you. So now that I've introduced him, welcome, Jim. It's great to see you again. We had a session a little earlier to help our business members. Now we're here to help my mom and dad, Jim's mom and dad, and each of you as well protect yourself from cyber criminals. So as we get started, I want Jim to give us just a little update. I'm going to take you all the way back to these crazy terms that you may hear and not know what they mean. So I just want to know what's phishing, and it's not, a hobby that we do on Sundays. What's farming, and it's not something that helps us get corn in the fall. And what is spoofing? Give us a little update on what those three terms we all may have heard about before.
Sure. So, I mean, it all comes down to kind of the same thing. It's basically criminals trying to use mail, email, phishing, or through your phones or through text messaging, basically trying to trick you into giving up your information. So a perfect example of a phishing email is you receive an email and it looks like it came from Amazon. And it says there's a problem with your account and you need to click a link to update your information, change your password, whatever it happens to be. Some of the newer ones even have a phone number in them where they'll have a phone number and they want you to call a phone number. And their goal is to basically rip you off. And people fall for these things. And well, I imagine most of your members at this point in time have heard the term phishing, and they've probably seen these and they've been warned about them. The problem is that criminals evolve. They continually change these types of things. And whenever they change them, they make it to where it's really difficult to tell what's happening. And so you go, okay, like right now, I think this year alone, it was like several 100% increase in phishing attacks. And so, sorry, my son just walked in. He's trying to give me a glass of water, but he thinks he's going to be on camera. And so he got a little nervous and ran away. That's too funny. You got to just come here. Sorry, there's my boy. Thank you, buddy. Sorry about that. There you go. So
real life, it's all good.
Yeah, there you go. So with phishing, basically it comes down to when you receive an email, or with farming, you receive phone calls or text messages. When you receive these things, you have to always stop and just take that extra moment before you provide any information, click on any link, dial any phone number, or open any attachment, because their goal is to try to make you react very quickly. Most of the time, it'll be things to try to make you scared, nervous, excited, like you're going to get something. It's something to motivate you to move quickly. And so your goal is always to just take a deep breath, stop and wait and just see, okay, what is this really? And so if it's an email, take that moment to read it over, read it a second time, even if it says it came from a friend, a loved one, a coworker, and they want you to click a link or open an attachment or call something. Those are like the three warnings. If you have to open an attachment, wait. If you have to click on a link, wait. Or if you have to call somebody, wait, and really do your research on those things, because that's where the criminals are having their success. If you click that link, sometimes that's all it takes to compromise your computer. You don't have to do like, oh, well, then you have to install something, you have to do all these steps. Literally just clicking the link can take you down a rabbit hole and install malware on your computer.
Oh, that's just crazy. And I know I can share that Amazon call. I think both of our parents got a different one. I'm walking my dog and my mom calls and says, hey, did Jordan spend $400 at Amazon? I thought, no, I don't think so, but let me check first. And I told her, don't call back. Do not call them back. If you have a question on your card, flip your card over and call that number. Always call that number. Do not call the number they provide.
Yeah, and that's the same with voicemails. Like if you come home or you get your phone, you have a voicemail that claims to be from the financial institution, and they say, "Oh, there's a problem. We need you to call back immediately." And they'll always say like a security issue, and then they give a phone number. If it's your financial institution, if it's you guys, yeah, pull out your debit card, look on the back of the debit card, call that number instead. You're so smart. I mean, that's exactly what you do, and you won't fall victim. And same with like Amazon's never going to send you an email saying to call them. It's never going to happen ever. They don't want to talk to you, so they're never going to do that.
No, and another one, you pointed something out. When we first started talking, we had introduced some text alerts to our members. And then, of course, in a matter of time, somebody figured out how to fake our text alert and even our phone number. So they had our phone number in the text alert, but when you pushed it, it went to another number. Tell us a little bit about that.
And this is spoofing. This is one of the things you asked me at the beginning. I kind of missed that. So spoofing is where you can spoof or pretend to be another number. And this works both with text messages as well as emails, as well as phone. So your phone can literally have the name of the financial institution show up, or the phone number of that exact institution show up. So when you see it, you go, oh, well, that's clearly them. So you answer and they go, yeah, hi, I'm calling from, wherever. And you believe them because you saw it on your phone. You can't trust that anymore. You can't, just because it comes to you and it says it on your phone, it's easily manipulated. There's programs out there that'll do it for you. There's apps that can do it for you. Anybody can do it to anybody right now. And there's no laws that really control it. They're supposed to be, but they're not enforced at all. And they're really weak. So it's really simple for criminals to do this. So if you receive a text message and it claims to be from your financial institution, again, don't click on the thing. A lot of times they'll claim you need to install an app. That seems to be the big MO. Oh, we have a security update. We need you to install this new updated app. It's never going to happen that way. You're never going to get a text message telling you to install an app from these guys. It's just never going to happen. So, and when in doubt, pick up the phone, again, dial the number that's on the back of your card and just say, hey, I got a text message claiming there's a problem. Hey, I got a phone call just now. And a lot of times if you have a person on the phone, they'll try really hard to not let you hang up. So they'll say, oh, there's a problem with your account. We're going to release these funds unless you give us this or tell us to do this. And you're like, well, no, I don't want you to release any funds. And they go, well, that's what we're going to do. We need to verify who you are. Give us your social security number. And you're like, well, I'll call you back. And they go, well, no, we don't have time. And they'll try to make all these reasons why you have to do it right now. And sometimes, I'm doing a poor job, but they can be very convincing. When they've got you on the phone, this is all they do every single day, and they've got it down. Your goal is to just to say, I'll call back, click. And that's all you have to say. It's just, I'll call back and hang up and then call back. Because if I was really calling you, they're not going to mind you calling them right back to verify your own security. It's not a bad thing because it's definitely not going to happen that way.
Oh, exactly. And just to share with members, when you get that text alert, the only question they ask is you need to give them a yes, a Y, or an N. Is this a legitimate purchase? We see you purchase this. Is this legitimate? Yes or no. There's nothing confidential there. And that will push that transaction through if you get that alert. But again, not asking for any personal information whatsoever, a simple yes or no.
Yeah,
and one more note before we move on, we do call from time to time with alerts if we think there are some questions. But when you get those calls, if you answer, be sure, again, nobody asks you to confirm anything. They'll say, hey, did you make this purchase? Did you make this purchase? Did you make this purchase? You say yes or no. That's all we needed to know. If you didn't make those purchases, they've identified fraud and they'll shut it down. But we don't ask you to confirm anything because they know everything that needs to be confirmed. So if you get a phone call like that or a text, these are yes or no questions, never account information.
Yeah, and they're not going to ask for a full social security number ever as well.
No.
That would be something that would just be unheard of, and that's almost any organization. So if they ever say, "Hey, what's your social security number?" hang up. There's no company on the planet that just flat out asks that question as a security check. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's another one where it wouldn't happen. So just hang up.
All right. Well, another thing we talked about earlier, I think would be great for our listeners, has to do with browser attacks and browser extensions. I know I've mistyped things from time to time and been amazed at the websites I ended up at. Tell us a little bit about these browser extensions and how dangerous those attacks can be.
Sure. So there's two kind of components there. There's one of how they try to trick you to put them on your computer, and then there's once they're on. So first, I'll talk about how they trick to get them on. So there's things called domain jacking or DNS spoofing or domain spoofing or typo squatting. There's a ton of names for it, but basically what it comes down to is criminals will go out and they'll buy domains like websites that are very, very close to the real website. So for example, instead of buying, let's say google.com, they'll buy it with GOOG, and then instead of having an L, they'll buy an IE, because if you look on your screen and you type Google with an I, the I could also be a lowercase L. So people will miss that. So they'll buy a domain name that looks similar, send an email to people and say, hey, click this link to get an update or something. And because it looks like it's really going to the site they thought they were going to, people are more apt to trust it. The other thing they'll do is they'll buy domain names that are one character off on your keyboard. So again, if I was talking about Google, they might buy GOOGL, and instead of E, they'll buy R. So it'd be GOOGLR.com. And you go, well, why would they buy that? But if you look at your keyboard, the E is right next to the R on your keyboard. And a lot of times when you're typing, especially when you're typing fast, you just type away and you're not really paying attention. You can hit that R instead of the E if your finger is just off a little bit. If the website comes up and it looks just like the site you thought you were going to, you're never going to realize you mistyped that domain. So criminals will go out, they'll buy these domains with the idea that people just make mistakes. And when they do, they'll end up at their sites. And then they trick them into doing things. And one of the really common ones is to install extensions. So what they'll do is you go to the web page comes up, it'll generally have the same color scheme at whatever the real organization was. So it'll look similar, and you'll say, hey, before you can complete, or for security purposes, we're now requiring a security extension before you can access the site. And you go, okay, and you just assume, well, I'm at the site I thought I was going to because I typed it in, it looks similar, what is this extension? And it'll have these web extensions. And web extensions, they're called web browser extensions, are these small applications that you can install into your web browser. Now, odds are right now, every person watching this has at least one or more extension installed, whether you know you installed it or not, or whether you remember doing it, because sometimes other programs will put them on your computer. Sometimes you do it and you don't realize you're doing it, but they can be really, really dangerous. And they can be dangerous even if you get them from legitimate sources. Like you could literally go to the Chrome store, install an extension, and then later they realize, oh, that was a dangerous one, and then they'll possibly remove it, but it could be months later before they do. These extensions cause a lot of problems. So the first thing is, if you're not sure if you have extensions and you want to figure it out, if you're on Chrome or if you're on Edge, you click the three little dots in the top right. And if it's on Firefox, you go to settings. Once you're in settings, scroll down and you either select more tools or it'll just say extensions, one or the other. Select it because you want to get to extensions. And once you get to extensions, it'll give you a list of all the extensions you currently have in that browser. Now, extensions have a ton of control over your web browser. They can literally monitor everything you type, they can monitor everything you receive, and they can also manipulate the page to look different than what you are seeing. So they can make it look like you're at your website or at your banking and online banking, but they can modify the amounts in your account to make them look different. They can do all sorts of crazy things. So my recommendation is if you see these extensions in your browser and you don't know what they are, just there's a little on off, it's a little disable button. Just disable every one of them. And by disabling them, you're already good. You're now solid. And then if it turns out later on something's not working the way it was supposed to before, you'll realize, oh, that was that extension. You can always turn it back on. But if you don't know what they are, start by turning them all off and then see if you really needed them or not. The only exception to that rule would be if you have something for antivirus. So if you have like Norton installed, you may have a Norton extension that you would want to leave turned on because that's for your antivirus. So if it's obviously that, that's fine. Everything else disabled, and it makes a huge difference because again, these things can do so much damage and can lead to so many different vulnerabilities and so many different breaches, and people have no idea these things even exist.
I saw a video that you made where you were stealing credit card information from people's web browsers without them knowing it. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, that one's crazy easy. So when you go to a website and you have a form, and you see the little web form and you want to fill it out and you start to type your name. So you type in JI for Jim. And as I get to the second letter, it already pops up a whole thing saying Jim, blah, blah, blah. And it wants to autofill it. And you go, oh, you hit like tab, I think, and it'll autofill all stuff for you. It's called autofill. And most browsers have autofill as available to you. So it's a really convenient feature. The problem is you can also do autofill for credit card information. So what I found is that I can actually manipulate a web page, make it look like you're filling out an email sign-up form where it's just asking for your name and your email address. And by you typing in the beginning and hitting tab, it's actually filling in a credit card application that you don't even realize, putting your credit card information in automatically, and you don't see anything because I hide it on the screen. All you see is your name and your email. And in reality, you're giving me the rest of your information. And now when you hit submit, or even if you don't hit submit, I've designed it to where it would just send it to me the minute it went into the forms. I now have that information and you didn't even see that it happened. Autofill is a really dangerous thing. It's one of those things that most people don't realize how bad it is. You can go into settings. If you type in, like, just go to Google and type in, how do I disable autofill? That'll be the fastest way, and put your browser in. If you disable autofill, you'll be a lot more secure. Yes, it takes a few extra seconds to type in the stuff, but it's way better than leaving it on. Worst case, you can disable just the credit card autofills. If nothing else, disable those. Because again, it's really, really easy for criminals to manipulate what it looks like on the screen, and you'll have no idea you're filling in all this other stuff, and it actually, submits it all right to the criminal.
How, if we end up at a website that isn't legitimate, how can you tell if it's legitimate, if a website is legitimate or not legitimate?
That is the million-dollar question. So there is no longer anything that tells you this. So it used to be you'd watch for HTTPS. You saw the little HTTPS and the little lock, you knew you were good because it was an encrypted page, and that meant something. Then they changed things. So several years ago now, it's been about 2 or 3 years ago, they decided that the encryption was so important that every website on the planet, if you have a website, it has to have an encrypted HTTPS so that you know that the data isn't able to be monitored by anybody on your network. By doing that, though, they basically have changed to where, to get the certificate, the thing you need to make it say HTTPS, anybody can get it. It's $7 on average for one of them, and it takes about 5 minutes to 10 minutes to get it. You fill out the little form and you get it. So now anybody on the planet has HTTPS on their website, whether it's legitimate, whether it's a scam, whether it's good or bad, it does not matter. It will always be there. So you can't just go, oh, I see the HTTPS, so I now know I'm at a legitimate site. It means nothing. So that's why it comes down to, you have to take a moment to do your research. So obviously, if you're going to a well-known, if you're going to Walmart, okay, you know Walmart, it's a big name. As long as you typed it in right and didn't mistype the letters, you're fine. If you're like shopping though, let's say it's a holiday and you're trying to find a good deal on something, in those cases, you need to do your research. So instead of just clicking on everything that's out there, hover over with your mouse, look at where the URL is going to. So it's www.whateverit.com. And then instead of going to the site to begin with, do your research. Or maybe you've already gone there and you found a really killer deal. Maybe the deal's too good to be true. Go to Google, put quotes around whatever the URL is. So let's say it was www.acmewidgets.com. You type quote, www.acmewidgets.com quote, and hit enter or submit. Google will then bring up all the stuff that's out there regarding that particular domain. Now, the reason you want to do that is because if nothing comes back, that means that site's probably not been around very long, and that's never a good sign. Or if some stuff comes back and says, hey, this looks like a scam, this looks kind of suspicious or whatever, again, you're getting some good information about it. On the other hand, if it's a ton of information comes back, it's been around a long time, there's Yelp reviews, there's all this stuff, well, then you go, okay, it's probably a legitimate site. It's got a lot of information, so you can feel better about it. So doing your research ahead of time really helps to know if it's okay. Now, the gray area, the exception to that rule is sites like Shopify. Shopify allows you to have your own mini store on their site. Criminals use this at a crazy, in fact, I would never buy anything from any store on Shopify. I know that sounds like super terrible just to say don't, but anybody can put one up and anybody can sell anything and then they can take it down. So criminals will spin them up. They'll have you buy stuff from them. They'll go and charge your cards. They'll get lots of money. And then they just take the site down and never ship you your stuff. And it happens every single day. You can read about tons of the scams that are going on with those. So that's one of the few sites I'd be really cautious about. It's not that I have anything against the company. I just think criminals have really taken advantage of it and they're not doing enough to shore it up on their side. So therefore you just can't trust it. Other than that, yeah, just be really cautious and do your research before ever submitting personal information or credit card information or anything like that to a website that you don't know of and you've never heard of.
So that you bring to mind something that I see frequently in Instagram, and that probably is that deal that's too good to be true. Is there anything that you can think of that would help our listeners identify if that site with the too good to be true shoe price and Instagram is real, or if they just stole all your information?
Sure. So, I mean, well, there's a website called, I believe it's urlvoid.com, urlvoid.com. If you go there, the site's not a great site, but you can put in a domain name. So, acmewidget.com, and it'll give you a list of information about that site. And it'll give you some details about what that site's all about, if it's legitimate or the stuff they know on it. If it has no information at all, again, that's not good. If it has lots of information, that's helpful. So that's one thing. And there's a lot of other sites. There's also things called whois lookups, which is a little bit more work, but I believe you can even go to whois.com, click on the little whois button, type in the URL there. And what you're looking for is it'll give you who owns the website. And it's very generic information. Most of it you don't care about. The only thing you want to pay attention to is how old is the domain. So it'll literally list when it was created, say created on, and then it'll have a date. If it was created 10 years ago, you can feel pretty good. That's a long-term domain. Someone's had it a long time. They clearly want to maintain this thing. It's probably all right. If it's been created in the last few months, I would never give my personal information to a site that's like 3 months or newer, because it just has no established record. You don't know what it is. You don't know if it's going to be around. So 6 months is still a gray area. A year, I'm feeling more comfortable. More than a year, okay, I feel good. Because what happens is most times criminals will spin up a malicious site. It'll go up online within a few weeks of them buying the domain. It'll last for a couple months, and then it'll be gone, because then they get taken down, and that's the end of it. So they have a very short run, and then those domains just go back out, and they don't renew them again. So if you can find one that's been around a while, you can feel better about it.
All right, one more question on phishing attacks. I know that I personally have won like $20 million from an uncle that died, and they just notified me of it. And then
Fantastic.
I know that the IRS wants to arrest me. I got that message the other day. I'm trying to think about all the other crazy things. Oh, if I buy a car and they offer me an extra $15,000 just because, so I can keep some and then give them the rest.
Yeah.
Those are 3 things that we have seen, we've helped members with. What are the other crazy schemes they've got running out there people should be aware of?
All right, so this one just happened. I just got a call from the other day. I felt so bad for this lady because she's cooked. Basically, what happened was she signed up for a job, and there was job lines. You can go to all these places, and the job was where it was somehow she was supposed to buy things and then ship them, and then they would provide her money to buy the things. And so it was like this total crazy scheme. But ultimately what ended up happening is they would say, okay, we're going to send you cashier's checks, but we need you to buy the stuff immediately. Well, the cashier's checks are just bogus checks. People have this idea that a cashier's check is guaranteed because it's a cashier's check, and it's a piece of paper. It's no more guaranteed than me just handing you an envelope and writing cashier check on it. It doesn't mean anything until it's actually deposited and clears. And that's the way they'll do these. They'll say, oh, we're sending you a cashier's check for $2,000. We need you to buy these things for $1,500 and then ship them to someplace generally out of the country. And so people go, oh, I'm gonna make $500. Sounds great. So they'll get the cashier's check. They feel all good about it. They'll buy the stuff. They ship the stuff. And then the cashier's check, of course, never clears, and they're out of the money. And it happens a lot. It's a really good one that criminals are doing. Warn your loved ones about it, because people, especially right now when people were down and out because of COVID, a lot of people were out of work temporarily, and they were trying to get temporary jobs. And they're like, oh, this is perfect. I can work from home. I can do this. And they feel like they figured out this way to do something great, and then they end up being in trouble. So that's a bad one. My father-in-law just fell victim to the Amazon one, and this was so mean. So he's 88 or 89 years old, and he gets an email from Amazon claiming that he bought a television set. And if he didn't buy it, he can call a number below. So he's like, oh, well, I didn't buy that television set. Clearly, it's a scam. So he calls the 800 number to let Amazon know he didn't buy it. Amazon supposedly answers the phone, And they go, oh, no problem at all. Don't worry. What we're going to do is we're going to put a freeze on this. You don't have to worry at all. Hey, while we have you on the line, we'd really like to capture these people that are doing this. Would you work with us on a sting that we're doing? And he's like, yes, like, he's got nothing better to do. Let's get these guys. So he's all pumped that they're going to get these guys. But to get them, he's required to drive around town, buy 4 different gift cards, read the gift card numbers over the phone to Amazon. So then somehow they're going to use these to then, I don't know, magically capture the crew. I don't know how they could possibly convince him of this, but he bought 4 different gift cards, read them the gift card information, sent it all over to them. And it sounds ludicrous. Like his wife finally called me and she's like, I don't think this is right. And I'm like, oh no. And so I stopped him before he did any more. But and it sounds like when you hear the story, and even afterwards when I went, Tom, this is a scam, then he looked back and went, this is so stupid. I can't believe I fell for it. But in the moment, he's a very, very sharp man who's done very well in life. Like he's not some, just moron that just was like, oh, hey, I'm an idiot with my money. But they're, again, really convinced. When they had him on the phone, he was so bought into it. He couldn't imagine for a second that this wasn't real. And so that's what you have to remember is they can make it seem really realistic. And it's a bummer, but that's what they do. So again, you can't get sucked in. You got to kind of, from that very beginning, take that deep breath, stop, reevaluate what's going on, try to get a number that's not in an email, not just some random number on a voicemail, find a legitimate number and verify it that way.
How can you tell the difference between a safe email and a fake email?
I wish there was a good answer here. So that's like I brought during, before COVID, when I was actually live, I used to bring people on stage and do that exact test where I would literally put 4 emails, 3 of them were malicious, 1 of them wasn't, and their job was to tell me which one was the legitimate email. And the reality was actually all 4 were bad. I was just screwing with them, but they couldn't tell. Like that's how impossible it is. You just look at them because it's going to come from a person it's going to have their name, it's going to have information that's related to you. It has all of these things. And so that's why it comes down to if you receive an unsolicited email, meaning you weren't expecting it, and it wants you to click a link and you don't know what that link is. And if you roll your mouse over it and it's going to a site, you don't know what that website is. It's got some URL you don't recognize. You've just got to stop, pick up the phone and call somebody, call whoever the sender is, or text them and say, hey, I just got an email from you. If it comes from, your son or your mom or your loved, just text them and say, I just got an email with a weird attachment. What is this? And they're either going to go, oh yeah, I just sent you a picture of Fluffy, our dog, or whatever. And you go, oh, okay, cool. Or they're going to go, I don't know what you're talking about, of which you're okay. And that's, again, coworkers, same thing. Like, don't just assume because you're at work and it comes from a coworker, it's from that coworker. Nowadays, it's so simple to make an email look very, very real. Now, for, if there's anybody that's like super techie out there and understands like header information, you can go into header information and look to see where the hops came from, to see where it really originated. But if you're that techie, you probably already know that. So, and if you're not, don't worry about it. It's more work than it's worth.
All right. Well, if somebody makes a mistake and they download malware on their computer, what can they do?
All right. So here's the thing. Once your computer is infected, it's really, really hard to just clean it up. My recommendation is always, start over. Have somebody just reload the operating system and start fresh, because most malware is designed to persist. It's not one of these things where if you delete this one file, everything's back to normal and you're all good again. It's designed to basically weave itself into your operating system and be extremely difficult to get out. Now, sometimes you get lucky and your antivirus knows the exact one and it can, get it and quarantine it, and then you're good. But in most cases, once it's on there, you're in trouble. And that kind of leads to why backups are so important. If you have backups of your computer, so, most of the time people have like pictures and documents and things like that on their computer, that's really important to them. If you have those things backed up, if you've saved them either to a flash drive or to an external drive or, to Carbonite or one of the many sites that are online that are in the cloud, well, then even if your computer gets completely wrecked, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, it's a little bit of work. It might take a couple hours for it to be reloaded. You might have to have somebody do it for you, but you haven't lost the stuff that's important to you. On the other hand, if you haven't done a backup and then you get something like ransomware, for example, ransomware, once it's on your computer, there's no unringing the bell. The way ransomware works is it gets on your computer and it goes in and locks. And by locks, what it's doing is it encrypts every file that could possibly be worth something to you. Every picture you've ever had, every Excel document, every Word document, everything that's possibly valuable. And it locks all that stuff up so you can't access it. And the only way you can get it back is if you pay a fee. It generally ranges for the average person, it's around $100. And if you do pay this little fee, they give you instructions. They're very, very, friendly, tech friendly, if you will, on how to pay them. They make it very simple. It's almost like they have a service desk at this point. They walk you through the steps to pay them. And if you do, most of the time they'll unlock your computer and you can get it back. If you don't pay them though, that data is gone forever. And people go, oh, well, I'll install antivirus later and it'll wipe it out and then I'll get my stuff back. It doesn't work that way. Even if you get the malware taken off and you can get your computer back to normal, the locked files stay locked forever. There is no unlocking them. And once that key is gone and they don't give it to you, you're out. So if you have a backup though, again, no big deal. You had all the stuff stored somewhere else. You didn't lose anything. It's a nuisance. You reload your system and you're back to normal. If you didn't have a backup though, you had maybe like wedding pictures or something that was really critical to you, then you're cooked. That's why you read about these organizations that, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars paying off ransomware because they didn't have the proper backups and they were locked out of all their systems. So malware is bad news. If you get it on your computer, you're done. Start over, just start from scratch, get it all cleaned up nice and neat, and then you can feel good again. Trying just to pick and choose and get stuff off your computer and hope it's back to normal, it's too risky because maybe it will look normal, but it's not. And then they're just monitoring what you're doing and then they can attack you again and again and again.
All right. And just one more thing I heard you say for our listeners, you did say even with antivirus, it is possible to click on something and load the malware on there just so people don't feel they're safe.
So antivirus is not a guarantee. It's one of those things where you absolutely want to have antivirus. It's kind of, you absolutely have it, but it guarantees nothing. I mean, think about before COVID, the average flu shot. A lot of people get a flu shot. It doesn't mean you're not getting the flu. It just means it shouldn't be as bad, or you might be protected from some variants of that flu. That's all antivirus can do is protect you from the stuff it's aware of and that it can possibly block out. But there's new stuff literally every minute. And if there's new stuff every minute, there's no way it can stop every single thing that's out there. So its whole purpose is to try to keep you as secure as it can from the low-hanging fruit. But there's a lot of other risks that can still get you for sure.
I had a question from a listener and they said, if you get an obvious spoof email, should you delete the email or put the email in your spam folder? What do you recommend?
Delete it. And that kind of ties to something else. A lot of times people will get, spam emails and they go, oh, this is junk. And at the bottom of the email, it'll say click here to get off our mailing list. Don't click here to get off our mailing list. The reason is that you're clicking another link. And if you're clicking a link, that link in its own self could be the malicious link that's installing malware on your computer. You're better off just deleting it, or you can create rules if you're comfortable with making rules on your thing that say, whenever I receive emails from this sender, send them straight to trash or something like that. For me, I get a lot of spam email. I just delete it. And yeah, it's a nuisance, but just delete. Don't keep them around. Just dump them. Don't click the take me off your list. Just delete them and move on. It's much, much better.
Is it safe to send those to your spam folder? When I get spam, I send it to my delete folder just so I don't even see it. Is that safe?
Yeah, you can send it to your delete folder. You can put it in your spam folder. It doesn't hurt to put it in those folders. You're not opening anything. You're not doing anything that's bad. Totally fine. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Just don't click the link to say, don't send this anymore to me.
Perfect. Great advice. Well, let's talk a little bit more about malicious websites. One of the things I've heard recently is something called typo squatting. What is typo squatting?
Yeah, that was the one I was talking about. I kind of blended it, and that was the domain assure or the domain spoofing, typo squatting. It's all kind of the same thing. And again, it's just where you have the malicious websites pretending to be legitimate websites. And again, it's just one of those things. Be really cognizant of what you're typing. If you're typing in any URL, look before you hit enter. And I know you won't. I don't. I type very fast. I plow through it. I hit enter. And so many times afterwards, I look at it, I go, oh, I fat fingered that. I gotta fix it now. And I've done it so many times. And I'm like, the guy who says, never hit enter till you look, and yet I do. And I just know it's because you're just in a hurry. You know, I'm working, I'm typing, I'm trying to do a million different things. Really try to take that breath and just take a quick look and make sure you didn't mistype a character, because that mistyped character will come back to haunt you so many different ways.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the dark web. A lot of people hear things about the dark web. A couple of years ago, I can say one of my favorite stores ruined my Christmas Eve because I had to send out a breach communication. And tell me what they do when a breach happens and they steal the information. How does this play into the dark web, and what do we do?
Sure. So the dark web, just to kind of explain it in basics, it's just like web browsing regular, but it's different. You can't use Chrome, or you can't use Edge or Firefox to get to the dark web. You have to use a special web browser. If anybody wanted to go there, because it's not illegal, you can actually check it out. Tor, T-O-R, is the primary web browser used. It's free, it's legitimate. You don't have to worry about being scammed by it. So it's just a Tor web browser. And that allows you to browse the dark web. Now, unlike the regular web, there's no search engine. You can't just go on the dark web and type in like, I want to buy, you know, bad stuff or whatever it happens to be, and hit enter. Instead, you have to know where you're going. And so it's kind of like, you gotta know the URL before you can go there. And so a lot of times people will set up sites on the regular internet that give you directions to the links to these other sites that are on the dark web. And I mean, even Facebook has a dark web page that you can go to for Facebook. So there are legitimate companies out there. The problem is that a lot of criminals have taken over the dark web, as you hear about all the time. And their whole goal is to make money. So if I go out and I'm a criminal, and let's say that I'm a hacker. So I hack into a database of an insurance company, and I steal 500,000 records from that insurance company. So now I'm sitting on those records, and I go, okay, well, I'm not an identity thief. I'm a hacker who steals those stuff. What do I do with it? Well, I can go on the dark web, go to one of the many sites that are set up to be merchandise sites. They're marketplaces, just like Amazon. And so you go to the website. I could set up my own shop in this dark web page, where now people can come to my shop and buy stuff from me, literally with a shopping cart, just like you would on Amazon, and I can sell it. So now I can say, I have these 500,000 records for sale, and maybe I'm selling it for, I don't know, 100 grand. And so you'd pay me in Bitcoin. Now, the next person comes along and goes, okay, well, I am also not the person who's going to use that for identity theft, but I think I can make money because I just bought that in bulk, 500,000 all at once. I'll now take that and I'll break it down into chunks. I may sell them at 10,000 records at a time for a markup. Next person comes along and says, I'll buy those 10,000 and sell them for 100 at a time. Finally, you get down to the first guy who goes, I want those to commit identity theft. So I'll buy 10 of those now for a couple bucks per account, and I'll go out and commit identity theft using that information. So it's this huge ecosystem all through the dark web where all these people are making money basically because of crime. And then you think about it, you go, okay, well, you know, who's doing this, or why would they do this? And while, you know, it happens all over the world, and there are criminals in the United States doing this, the vast majority are being done from other countries, especially like third world countries where the average person has very little chance of making any real money. So if I'm smart, I'm a techie guy, and I live in a third world country somewhere where I'm lucky if I can make a few $100 in a year or whatever, if I can do this, and I can go out and hack into an organization, steal a database, and put it on the dark web and make, you know, 100 grand in an afternoon, that's huge business for these people, and that makes sense. And it's this huge economy. It's now, I think it's the fastest growing economy in the world is cybercrime, and I think it's the second, or maybe it's the first now, largest industry. I mean, it's huge money. And it's because it is so lucrative and it is so easy for criminals to do. And the dark web has facilitated all of that and just made it really simple. And I mean, it's not just identities, it's anything. You could buy, you need a driver's license. There's websites dedicated just to giving you driver's licenses. You need a passport, they'll give you a passport. So from an identity theft standpoint, I can see information, I can have a license made, I can have a passport made, I can have all this stuff made to make me be you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And then, I mean, just to share with our listeners, I remember that breach very well because the criminals are so savvy that they even know where to spend it. So the information they purchased off the dark web, they knew the person lived in Woodbury. and they shopped in Woodbury. They went to the Cub in Woodbury and bought $100 gift cards. So they knew what thresholds were, and the money was gone. Of course, the members were protected because of the Visa MasterCard guarantee, but it was just a very very busy time trying to protect everyone and issue new numbers because of just how savvy and the length of the information that was sold. It was just amazing to see how it was used, and it kind of outsmarted a lot of the Falcon software that's designed to identify fraud when it's happening.
Absolutely. And they'll even use runners. So I might be in I might be in Russia. So I'll hire people in the United States to go shopping, and I'll tell them, hey, you're secret shoppers. We're going to give you money. We want you to go buy these items. And then once you buy the items, you'll ship them to us. And they'll actually, have them go out, make the purchases with the stolen credit card information. And then the people will purchase the stuff, ship it. And then the people are the ones who are left on the back because they're the ones who are on camera buying the stuff. I mean, there's so many different ways that they do these things, and people have no idea. So yeah, it's nuts, and it's not difficult.
What is your advice to help people protect themselves from that? What is the best way to protect yourself from that?
I mean, it's really hard. Obviously, you've got to, monitor your identity, and you can either do it yourself or you can hire one of the third parties like LifeLock or something like that. But you want to monitor your credit. So go to annualcreditreport.com. Yeah, annualcreditreport.com. They are required by law to provide you 3 reports a year. You absolutely want to do that. If you're not pulling your credit report every year, and because they offer 3, there's the big 3. There's TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So what you do is you go and you get 1 on the first month. So in January you get 1. Then you wait 3 or 4 months, then you get the second one. And you get, so like if I got TransUnion first, then I would get Experian, and then I'd wait 3 or 4 months, and then I would get Equifax, and then I would do that every year, because now you're kind of covering throughout the year, getting free reports, and generally whatever's on one will be on the other 2 for the most part. So this allows you to monitor your credit for free. So that's a simple way to do it. Put freezes on your credit, so you can go again to any of the big 3, put a credit card freeze on there, and that's, or not, it's just a credit freeze, not a credit card freeze, a credit freeze. And what that does is it stops criminals from being able to open up new accounts and things under your name. Again, all that stuff really makes a big difference. Yes, it's a nuisance. Yes, it's a little bit of work, because then you got to, if you ever want to open an account or buy a house or things, you have to then unfreeze it. But it makes sense. It allows you to have protection that otherwise anybody can do anything with. And a lot of people go, oh, well, I'm not really worried. I don't think anybody's stolen my social security number. And in this day and age, your social security number has been stolen. I mean, there's almost nobody left on the planet that hasn't had their social security number stolen. And not because you did anything wrong, but just because there's been so many breaches out there that your social security number has ended up in something. And if you're lucky, it was in some breach that only one person sat on, they did what they were going to do, and they've moved on. If you're unlucky, it's out on the dark web, and it just gets sold over and over. And the problem with the social security number is that's you for life. So someone goes out, they steal your identity, they do a bunch of damage to you, you get it all cleaned up, and you feel all good. Well, your identity's still out there, that social security number's still out there. They can come back and use it again. So it's from a criminal standpoint, it's the gift that keeps on giving. They can hit you every couple of years with that same number. So it's really, really hard. Again, that's why you want to stay on top of it. The more you can monitor, the more you're aware of what's happening, the more you lock things down, the less risk you have.
Perfect. I want to transition to something I've always wondered about myself. One of our members asked this question, they're on the call today, and they said, do AIs like Alexa and Siri or remote video security system make households more vulnerable to breaches?
So basically, you're talking about anything that's an Internet of Things device. IoT is what they're all referred to as. And yes and no. So I know it's kind of a stupid answer, but it's true. So the big guys, when you're talking about Amazon with their Alexa, or you're talking about Google Home, or or Sonos, these big mega companies, for the most part, those have held up very, very well. They've had a few risks here and there. They address them within hours. They push out the updates, and so they do a really, really good job. Now, I mean, who knows behind the scenes if they're spying on you? There's all sorts of conspiracy theories there. They claim they don't. It'll be a huge upset if they did. And you figure they're a large enough corporation that they really were. Some of the employees would have ratted them out at some point, because not everybody's happy there. So I think they're doing the right things. Now, the rest of the things, especially the camera systems, there's been so many breaches in the camera system space. because there's so many that are made by these tiny little fly-by-night companies. A lot of stuff's made in China. There's no real security. There's no updates that are pushed out. So when vulnerabilities are found, they just stay out there forever. Tons of risks with those. Same with things like door locks. There's companies that literally make the door locks. If that vulnerability is discovered, the company just rewrites their name, continues to make the same door lock under a new name, continues to sell it on Amazon under a new name, and they never patch the holes. And that happens all the time. So the trick is big company names you're generally okay with. A lot of the small stuff, you're taking risks. And I mean, I still have like right now, I have no idea who made this camera. I had to use it for some stuff I was doing. It's called Yi or Yi, Y-I. I guarantee you there's vulnerabilities on this. I guarantee it. So clearly I don't leave it hooked up in any way, shape, or form. I hook it up when I need it, and then I disable it when I'm done. The smart sockets, there's a lot of different ones where you can control your lights and stuff. A lot of those have had vulnerabilities. The thing you want to watch for is there updates available? Go to their website and see if they talk about like a support web page where there's updates that they can push out or that they push out automatically. Do a little research ahead of time to find out what do they do to keep their product secure. They don't talk about security and they don't mention any place about updates. That's a product that's probably at risk.
Wow. I have one more similar system. Someone asked, how can I protect my information using an Xbox or other connected gaming consoles?
So the consoles themselves, you're pretty much at the mercy of the organizations. Now, if you're using, like, a lot of times people will load gaming onto their desktops, and then there's a lot of manufacturers now, all the big guys, Norton and all of them, have made antivirus specifically for console or for gaming computers. But when it comes to the consoles themselves, other than making sure you're not sharing your login ID, you have a pass key on it. Some people don't even put a pass key on their consoles. That's a bad idea. You want to have some sort of a key locking it up. And you can change your password from time to time. But the biggest risk people generally face is their kids share their credentials with their friends. And that's where problems happen. Beyond that, I don't know there's much more you can do.
Okay. Are there any password wallets that you recommend and why?
All right. So this is where I'm under contract with Norton. I'm a spokesperson for them. So I'm a Norton guy. Go Norton. That's I live and bleed. That said, they've got a great one. There's a lot of other ones out there. There's not like there's any I don't like. I would go with big names. That's important. Again, the bigger the name behind the company, the more I feel good about that. Because there are risks. Some of the cloud-based ones have been hacked and there have been breaches. So you just need to kind of do your research about it. Again, Norton, I joke because I am with them, but they have a very good product. It holds up very, very well. There's good reviews on it. But do your research. That they're all similar. They all kind of do the same thing, which is store your passwords. The key with any of them is whatever one you're using, make sure that the password that you use on the device, on that particular application itself, is a password you have never used in your life or anything else. If you're using the same password on that you've used on other things, you're just looking for problems. Because if some criminal finds that password through something else, and it might not be your fault, maybe another company had a breach, they now have access to that password, depending on what solution you're using. If it's cloud-based, they now can get into that, and then you could be in real trouble. So make sure you have a very strong, very unique password that you've never used before for it, and they all do an okay job.
Similar to password protection things, I think of my phone, and I was super excited to get the Apple phone where just looking at the phone opens my phone up. Before I had one with a fingerprint. Should you change the passwords on there, even though my face or finger is always opening up my phone?
I mean, on the phone itself, there's nobody's going to have access to it. You're probably fine. I mean, obviously, if you have people you share your phone with, or you're letting them log into it or something, I don't know, maybe you're dating somebody and then you break up. Obviously, you want to lock it up at that point or make sure you've changed it just in case, because not every relationship ends on a high note. So something like that you might want to take care of. But your phone itself, especially if you have the Face ID and those types of things, those are pretty darn strong. They hold up really well. So if it makes you comfortable, you can change your key. But if it's a unique key on that phone and you don't use it anywhere else, no one's gaining access to it. They're not going to have access to it in any other way. So you can let it sit for a while.
Perfect. Another listener password question. Is it safe to have the computer remember my passwords?
That is another really good one. And it's funny. So there has been issues where people have been able to use against you. For example, when it does remember your passwords for your logins, if I have access to your computer, I can pull all of those up. Every one of them you can see in plain text. So it comes down to, how secure is your computer? It does make me nervous. That said, I do use it sometimes. So I'd be a hypocrite to say never do it, because there are some websites, and basically I use it on sites that I just don't care about, that have no confidential information. But I rarely go to them, and I go, oh, I'm going to want to remember this site later. And so I put in some random password I never use, and I assume it'll remember it for me when I go there again. I'll just have it remember. So make sure it's a unique password that you don't use anywhere else. And if it's a site where you have confidential information, I wouldn't use it obviously for online banking. Not my best idea. But for something where it's just some random site you go to every once in a while and they required you to have an account, maybe you'd ordered something, but you didn't store your credit card information there or anything, but they wanted you to have an account, I don't see it as a big deal then.
Okay, a couple more questions that are device specific. I know that at the credit union, when we have loaded our apps, Apple always took weeks to look at our app and make sure everything worked the way it was supposed to. Android basically put it up that day. So with that in mind, and knowing the little differences in how things make it through Apple, if I have a MacBook, do I need to install antivirus? Are MacBooks more protected than a different type of computer?
Yeah, so Mac is not more protected. So Apple has vulnerabilities as far as Macs versus PCs. They have vulnerabilities just like PCs. Now they're not targeted as much. They have 1/10 of the market share. So when it comes to desktops, if I'm a criminal, do I want to target the much bigger guy who has lots more footprint, especially in the business sector, or do I want to target the smaller guy who has very small footprint, mostly just students and people in marketing and graphic design? I'm going to go with the business side, and that's what most criminals do. So that's why you see a ton more attacks against PCs. But Macs definitely have vulnerabilities. You absolutely should have antivirus on a Mac. Because there's, just this year alone, there's been a number of different malware that's been spread just for Mac. So absolutely you'd want it. But just on a side note, so you mentioned Apple. So when you're talking about phones or tablets or things like that versus PCs, there's a huge difference. So if I have a choice between using my phone to read emails or to do browsing or using my desktop, use a phone or a tablet. They're so much more secure. It's not even the same realm. You're talking about like, T-ball and the majors. Like it's just such a huge difference in security on these devices. So if you're like in doubt, let's say that you have your tablet and you have your desktop and you receive an email and it had an attachment and you are absolutely adamant, I need to know what that attachment was, but you're also just still a little skeptical, use the tablet to look at it and you're probably going to be okay. Or if you want to be really secure, pick up a Chromebook. Chromebooks are almost bulletproof. Those things are so good. In fact, so like if you have a loved one and let's say that they're maybe not super technical, maybe it's, your grandparents, or in my case, my parents. So my parents were getting viruses all the time on their computer. And finally, I just went over to their house, took their computer and replaced it with a Chromebook. And they can do everything they needed to do because they're just basically doing web browsing, they're doing email, basic stuff. Chromebook can do all of that stuff and they're not getting any of the viruses and that type of stuff. So if you have the choice, definitely go with a Chromebook or go with the tablets, those types of things. They are more secure. And then as far as between Apple and Google, which is more secure, to your point, Apple definitely puts more work into making sure the different apps that are in their store are secure. That said, Apple's had a truckload of apps that made it through that are still vulnerable. So don't just assume just because it's on one of these stores, whether it's Apple or Google, that somehow makes the app legitimate, or just because it had 500,000 downloads, now I know I'm okay. They'll discover years later that these apps were super malicious, doing really bad stuff. It comes down to how, what is it that I need on my phone? Do your own research on the app, do your own research on the company that made the app.
Well, and one more phone question. I know that I can get my emails on my phone, which means you can be spoofed on your phone. If you click on something on your phone, is it the same as on your computer, or are you more protected?
Yeah, you're more secure on your phone. Now, most of the time, at least the newer, more sophisticated criminals out there, what they'll do is when they send the email, if you click from your phone, they'll literally have a different pay vector or attack vector than if you click from a PC. And on your phone, what they'll try to do is get you to install apps. So it'll say like, oh, we need you to install this app. And of course, the app will be bad. Or maybe it's not bad today, but apps can have updates pushed out automatically that then become bad. So be cautious about from your phone. If you get a text message that's trying to get you to install something or a link that's trying to get you to install something on your phone, be really, really cautious. I mean, like really cautious, because that's what does you in on any kind of mobile device, tablet, things like that. It's the apps that are what really take you down. If you don't install a bunch of apps, your thing remains, solid. The minute you start installing all these random apps, that's where all the risks come in.
All right, I have another phone question.
Sure.
You and I talked about this in preparation for our talk today, and I get these phone calls from no one all the time. Every now and then I'll answer, and I swear someone answered back to me and I felt like they were trying to replicate my voice. Am I just crazy, or is that kind of fraud out there?
Okay, so it's been reported before. It got a bunch of press at one time where it was like, whatever you do, if you say hello, or if you say, they'll try to get you to say yes or certain words, and then they're going to use those words to go to these other prompts to use your voice against you. It is technically feasible. And I'm sure at some point somebody did it for proof of concept to show it could be done. It is not being done on a daily basis. It's so much work for any criminal out there. Like, unless you're like the president of the United States, or unless you're, the CEO of some huge mega corporation or tied to the military or something, you're not being targeted for that stuff. And it's just way too much work. It's just not worth it. I mean, there's so many, if they're going to target you that way, there's a million other ways they could have targeted you that would have been far more lucrative and a lot easier. So it could happen, but it's probably not going to happen that way. I don't know. Most of the time with those systems, what they're looking for is they want to leave you voicemails. So what will happen is if you answer, they just disconnect. If you don't answer, then they'll leave you a voicemail, because their goal is to get you to call a number. Sometimes the numbers are trying to charge you, or they want you to go somewhere and then they can run whatever their scam is that way. So they want to leave just a voicemail. They don't want to get you as a human on the phone.
All right, and I didn't win a trip to the Bahamas. None of that stuff is real.
I mean, I'm sorry, maybe you did, but I don't think so. I don't think
never know
your
now.
uncle, yeah, your unknown uncle probably didn't leave you the 20 million either. I'm sorry to say.
All right, well, it is 2:58. So last words to sum it up. Anything else you can tell us to help our members stay safe today?
Education. Keep aware of what's going on. Right now, you can go to their credit union right here and get information on cybersecurity. And this is a huge thing, because they're give you information daily on the risks that are going on out there. And to me, that's what it all comes down to. If you know about the risks, you don't fall victim. I mean, I talk to my parents constantly about whatever's going on right now, because it's not like they're dumb. I mean, they're smart people, but if you don't know the risk is out there, then when it happens to you, you don't know what's happening. So the more information you can get, and not just for yourself, but to share with loved ones, coworkers, friends, and all those, the less risk you have. And so, continually come back, check their site, get the latest updates, because it does make a huge difference. I think if you just do that, yeah, you've greatly reduced your risk.
Thanks, Jim. And for everyone that's listening, we have partnered with Jim's company, Stickley on Security. And as a result, we have their daily security feed on our website. And you also can sign up for a weekly email newsletter with great information, because as we shared, sadly, cybersecurity or cyber fraud is increasing every day. So it's good to know what's going on and how to protect yourself. And again, I want to thank Jim for your time today. Thank you for sharing this. We are going to engage with Jim again in the fall, because things are always changing and we want to try to keep you safe. So we'll have some updated topics, updated information, and give you some additional ways to learn about things and then try to protect yourself. So thank you to Jim very much for your time today. And thank you to our members at Ideal for joining us.